We spoke about your grandfather who was half Mohawk, and that's where you draw some of your indigenous wisdom, I suppose, from.
That you're right about.
Yes, my first one. It only took half an hour to get here.
Regeneration is found in indigenous wisdom cultures, quantum thinking. It's a way of seeing. No psychological spaces. We don't believe in this. Safety is not an issue. People have to learn to be roughed up, but not by other people. What would you do with your children? You want your children to grow up in a safe psychological space, or you want them to be able to deal with a world that's ridiculously chaotic and unsafe, and not be thrown by, not be bothered, be able to take on and lead. I'm not upset with individuals. I'm upset with the institutions.
I'm honored to have Carol Sanford in this episode. Carol is a multi-award-winning author of 7 books and a renowned speaker specializing in regenerative business practices. And if when hearing this, your first thought is, this is not for me, this is just another business podcast, please stick around. Whether you're an individual aiming to improve your life, an entrepreneur starting a conscious business, or an executive looking to drive effective change, her theory of change applies across all areas of life, from relationships and career to work and business. And what I love about her theories is they're all about personal agency, from doing away with feedback to developing a new model of thinking, to revolutionizing our approach to learning. Carol's teachings advocate for self-authority. So in essence, she's teaching us how to take our own power back. And before we begin, a disclaimer: Carol has ALS, which is a neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells and can make her speech unclear at times. But we will add subtitles to ensure clarity for this episode. Carol, welcome to this podcast. My audience is meeting you for the first time. And to introduce you, I'd like to start with your Shift Happens story, which is a pivotal moment in your life that has built you into the person that you are today.
I'm 82 years old, so to ask me the pivotal moment is ridiculous, because I have a philosophy that you should change your direction at least once a year. So I have about 100 stories. I think one of the ones people often find interesting is I worked briefly with Thomas Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of the Scientific Revolution. He was a visiting professor when I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, and he, along with several other professors, had a habit, I guess you'd call it, of going to the Rathskeller on Telegraph Avenue and hanging out with students. And he was a very Socratic person, and so we asked him a lot of questions, and he would always ask us questions back. But he had just written Elizabeth in 1962. You weren't born, I bet. And he had just written that book. And so we were all trying to figure out what he meant by paradigm. And he hadn't created much of anything about what to do with it. And so I asked him, how would you use this idea to help people change? And I think I said to change people, which he corrected. He said, I don't know. That's your job. I did the work of coming up with the concept. I took that incredibly seriously. And I then taught 10 years later at San Jose State University in Silicon Valley. And I introduced my first concept of paradigms, which people will see in my books, that were based on my taking to heart his challenge or charter. and I worked on it every day of my life since
Wow.
1962. I had a couple of other great teachers who taught me more about how to do that, but that was a pretty pivotal moment.
You mentioned Socratic Principles. Is it correct that I notice a specific trend or thinking drawn from the Socratic model of teaching in your work?
I did go back and I worked in Greece quite a while. I worked with professors and practitioners who had tried to keep the school that Plato had and Socrates alive. And so my other teachers tended to be more Socratic in addition to Kuhn, and my grandfather certainly was. But what that means is usually misunderstood. Most people think it's asking questions, and it's really more about getting people to wake up and to examine themselves and their thinking and how they're thinking, not to try and learn answers, your own or anyone else's. And so I adhere to that philosophy. A model is like a model airplane. You build it the same way every time. A philosophy is a way of studying. It literally comes from the word to study. So that's my philosophy also.
Yeah, and central to that philosophy, correct me if I'm wrong, is the fact that we possess the wisdom and the knowledge inherently within, and therefore nobody can tell us what the answers are. They can help us to draw, and that's the purpose of a teacher, is to help us to draw those answers.
That's another misunderstanding. It's not that we have it, it's we can develop it within us. We have the capacity, but it's not developed when we're born. It's not like hidden and you ask enough and they'll come out. You have to learn how to learn and learn how to
Interesting.
use your capacity. So Socrates never said you already know it. He said you can discover it by thinking in a different way. And so too many people, a lot of people that just run on about their thinking, thinking somehow they already know. That's a disservice to people to say you already know the answers. You already have the capacity innately to discover them by looking at your thinking and developing your capacity to see the world differently.
And would you say, so when we speak about regeneration, many times it requires a lot of explaining what it actually means, because many times it is it's used interchangeably with sustainability, which is incorrect. And it's so much more than zero waste and no harm. It's so much more than resilience and sustainability. Can you elaborate? What are the differences?
It's not related to those. It's unrelated. It's not beyond or all those words you use. Well, regeneration is a paradigm. It's not a doing. It's a you could do any of those in theory regeneratively, but regeneration is found in indigenous wisdom cultures, quantum thinking. It's a way of seeing. So, and the reason I cringe is you never can explain it to people. You have to create an experience, and it takes a particular kind of framework, what I call ordering frameworks, that cause the mind to see more. We get a bunch of right, wrong, good, and bad, and that's how you were interpreting contrarian, or you said you were not doing that, but when you say you have a better answer, you are. So I give people a way to look at the whole and then assess where they are in the whole, not as though there are two answers.
And what would lead people to want to think differently? Why would they typically join such a, for example, online call?
They can only get in by referral. They can't get in. So they
Like, what is
don't.
the reason? Like, what is the benefit that they're seeking to accomplish by doing that?
Well, there's nobody who's the same. Let me try and give you a way to think about it. As often it starts with people who work with me make, and this is in published writing, make 35 to 65% increase in revenue growth per year. That sounds outrageous, and that's even in the grocery industry. So that often gets their attention, but most of them come because they have a longing to do something that really matters, or they wouldn't have approached sustainability, regeneration. They're longing to do something. I've never met an ill-intended manager, even in extractive companies like DuPont. Their CEO, who wrote the foreword to my first books, said, I always wanted to do what we're doing now, but I didn't know how. So the how. Now, most people like Jeffrey Hollander, seventh generation, who is now a Unilever, a European company owned, he said, who has been your favorite person to work with? I said, I don't have any favorites. Why do you ask? He said, can I talk to someone? I said, sure. So I connected them with Will Lynn, who was a president of Kingsford Charcoal. And as he talked to him, he said, he's doing what I want to do. And I didn't know how. He's making a safe company, working with dangerous chemicals, and he knows how to work with people so they grow. And he said, I want to do that. I said, well, Will Lynn has to refer you because I don't accept people hiring me. You have to be referred by someone who's been through it because they'll ask you questions. They'll help you decide whether it just piques your attention or your curiosity or whether you really, really are ready. So that referral process is how they get there. And there's a pretty heavy restraint to them coming in. That's why you can't be a consultant. You don't sell what we do. You try and keep people from doing it until they're sure. In my change agent groups, I've got, I don't know, over the years, well over 600 people, all of whom have come in through being referred by another change agent, consultant, and there's coaches. And when that person invites them, they commit to being their sponsor for life, not for just entering. So we build a community, people learn in, and then you learn more about yourself, not so much about the technology for the first year, not how to do it, but who you are and how to change and grow yourself. So people come, you said, why do they come? They have to feel that. They have to feel that demand to be uncertain, not be sure they've already got the path. And they have to hear from someone who's been through it for a few years and how much work it really is and how it's not about the next step in sustainability or going beyond. It's unrelated. You throw out all that stuff and start over.
So regenerative thinking, though, it reflects positively on the bottom line, and it's also good for creating safe psychological spaces.
No safe psychological spaces. We don't believe in that. No, I didn't say it wasn't safe. No. I said safety is not an issue. We don't teach. People have to learn to be roughed up, but not by other people. I said to Michael Barker at Google, who created a program, I said, what do you want? You want people who are resilient in the face of difficulty, or you want to create a place that they never get bumped at all? What would you do with your children? You want your children to grow up in a safe psychological space, or you want them to be able to deal with a world that's ridiculously chaotic and unsafe and not be thrown by it, not be bothered, be able to take on and lead? He said, I never thought of it that way. I said, we're making a huge mistake with this psychological safety. I have several podcasts on it, and one, it's a do-gooder idea. A humanist, take care of people. Well, if you did that to your kids, they'll be crippled. Same is true for your employees. You want to teach them to think, to be self-managing, and not reactive, not disturbed, to be able to take on anything. So, no psychological safety.
So, and you're not pro people who are compliant, because in many of your books, there's this thinking that we've forgotten to think for ourselves, or forgotten how to think for ourselves, that many times we obey the orders from leadership. And it's somewhere you write that it's like the blind leading the blind. And how can we learn to think for ourselves? What does it take?
But I'm not upset with individuals. I'm upset with the institution who is structured. If you have a competency program, you judge everyone against, get rid of it. That's teaching compliance thinking. I have the real answer to get rid of that is get rid of behavioral psychology, rewards, feedback, recognition, all those things are destructive to people thinking for themselves as business people, as citizens, as educators. You have to build organizations that require people to think for themselves. An individual can't change it alone. It's too big a challenge.
And I realize that the next question is again one of those big questions that you can't answer in just one episode on a podcast. However, just one idea or one thought with respect to why are traditional feedback systems detrimental in an organization, and why do you even consider it a toxic practice, giving feedback?
You know where the idea of feedback comes from?
Tell
do
me.
You? Machines. It's a term out of machine theory. You build in overflow spigot and something's hot or toxic, and you have a overflow mechanism that shuts it off. That's called the feedback loop. Now, when you tell someone what you think, you create a spigot that shuts off them thinking for themselves, because the brain is wired to toggle between my ideas and others' ideas. And if you're continuously toggling the feedback from others, they're actually losing, we'll use a metaphor, the muscle for looking at themselves. So it's the worst. I wrote a book called No More Feedback. Just one book on that one subject because it's so damaging. And most of it is because it is based on, I don't know, I had 6 flaws, but the one of them is it conditions people to listen to others and not themselves. So the problem with that is that most people project their own problems onto people, not what's really happening. So they're getting false information. And secondly, or third, was on top of this, you build an organization where other people judge other people all the time, and you build collusion teams. So even when you do 360-degree feedback, without ever talking about it, the research shows people collude against people. And guess who gets colluded against the most? So it's one of the biggest programs for racism.
Mm,
Is I have feedback.
mm,
And I read my book. Tom Peters, who wrote In Search of Excellence, which is the best-selling book in the business world of all time, said he thinks my book, No More Feedback, is the most important book this century.
mm,
And he wrote the foreword to my
mm,
7th book because he was so excited about having another way to do it.
mm. If I'm not mistaken, he's a expert in top-down leadership. So it's the more old-fashioned, traditional, typical type of people first type of strategies.
Right.
Tom
However,
Peters.
he no longer calls himself an expert because I told him that's a terrible epistemology. It means you know more than other people. That's not very helpful because it isn't true. You know
Mm,
some things, you have some knowledge, it's useful, but claiming you think for other people is not
mm,
good for the world. So he's on
mm.
my side now.
He wrote something about being positive in excellence or being excellent or
Yeah.
something. I don't remember the
In
title of
Search
his
of
book.
Excellence.
Correct.
He's
Yes,
written
that's.
30 books.
Mm, mm. Well, that's a beautiful compliment and well placed and well deserved. Meanwhile, I'd like to, if you are still feeling okay for another 2 minutes, I would like to ask
I'm
two more
okay for
questions.
another probably 10 or 15.
Great, wonderful. Um, I'd like to speak a little bit about being a positive contrarian.
Yeah.
And where did that term come to you from? Who labeled you that?
Well, it didn't come to me. My grandfather, Mohawk grandfather, took me on a little bit of a vision quest at 6 years old,
Wow.
where usually only boys go on these. But I could see I was quite in. He had a lot of hope for me in the world, and he put a lot of energy. He said, each turtle, he called us, each turtle born comes in with a promise to do something for the world. And
Mm,
we don't know what it is, but the vision quest is about discovering that. It sometimes comes in an animal totem, but it can come many ways. And I was only 6, and he said, he watched me battle with my father, who was very racist. And I was so confused about why he had the thoughts he had. And my grandfather said, because you can see a wholeness in people. You see
mm,
something that your father can't see. And
mm,
the good news is you don't tell him he's wrong. You ask him questions. You try and lift up his ability to see it for himself. I call
mm,
that being a positive contrarian. You don't have the answers. You have a process for discovering. And so
mm,
it wasn't positive as in the opposite of negative. It was positive in the sense that it makes something move, like positive charge.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
so he after that
Became
called
your
me.
a bit of your North Star in a sense.
Well, I don't like that term either. And it's because it doesn't have any, you pick it. He said, I didn't pick positive contrarian. It wasn't
Mm,
my choice.
mm,
Well, it was, but before I was born. It's called essence. My essence is disrupt certainty. Have you
mm.
noticed I've done that to you about every 30 seconds?
Yes.
Don't be certain about that. And that's what a positive contrarian does. they disrupt certainty. And so I didn't like it for years. I was probably 50 by the time I understood what he meant, because I thought he meant I was always opposed to things. And he meant I was opposed to the process people were using to get to conclusion. I don't ever disagree with a CEO. I don't give them advice. I don't tell them what I think. They can't get me to. They can't pay me enough to ever tell them what I think. So the process is always giving a framework for them to think through, and inviting them and asking questions over months and years. I have some CEOs in big corporations I've been working with for 40 years. And as they said, it's very hard to switch how you think in a corporation, even when you're in charge. So they don't have an upset with me. They have sometimes they think of me as their mother, I think, but not because I take care of them, but because I love them so much, enough that I never try and give them advice or disagree or make them wrong.
Yes, but you do challenge or expand their thinking in a sense, because
No,
you help them look at things in another way or from another perspective.
See, that's a wrong paradigm. I teach them a framework, and I give them no thoughts about what to think. I teach them, like, for example, one framework I like to use with them is saying, all right, you're going to make some decisions and you want to do it better. Here's a framework to use. Are you going to think about it as things, people, and things? You're going to think about it as a process. You're going to think about it as the essence of the question, or you're going to think about it in sourcing terms, where your ideas are coming from. So we walk through all of those. And none of it I say, here's what you could think. All I'm doing is giving them those 4 aspects of a framework, which give them a way to position their mind. I don't help them. I don't get involved in the content. I don't add my thinking. Nothing like what we think of coaches and people doing. All I do is offer, where are you going to think about it? Which is, and that's one of a few hundred ways. So a very different way of being with people.
And we spoke about your grandfather, who was half Mohawk, and that's where you draw some of your indigenous wisdom, I suppose, from.
Yeah.
And is there a specific
that you're right
way?
about.
Yes, my first one. It only took half an hour to get here. And I got so excited I forgot what I was going to ask. So in what way do the indigenous practices or principles or ways of thinking apply into modern business, or how can we learn from that? One thing that we can learn from the indigenous practices.
So I tell people, don't ever ask for one thing. You're asking for flatland thinking. You're asking for one point of reference. That's a terrible thing to do. So I wrote a whole book called The Regenerative Business, and 4 more since then, which one of them is called The Regenerative Life. So the Regenerative Life has 9 roles that in society, and one is parenting, one is content creator, educator, designer, entrepreneur, citizen, spirit leader, economic shaper, earth hinder. And so there's 9 roles in life, and I use this work to examine them. I look at the essence of each one, if you thought of it regeneratively. I did it as a what we call an action lab. So I had hundreds of people who spent 6 months with me examining their career and realizing these 9 were about roles. It could happen in any place, including parenting. So that process of working through the regenerative principles with a bunch of roles was designed to give people how to get perspective. I do have people who ended up kind of shifting career based on playing with it. But like designer is in all 9. Educator is in all 9. So the concept of regeneration is ubiquitous, and that's why it's a way of seeing the world. And why my grandfather said every day he asked how he could play his role as a human in regenerating the field of energy for all of life. So
brilliant. And we spoke about several thoughts or things that we could draw from 7 of your books. Is there an 8th book in the making?
8, 9, and 10 are in the works.
Wow.
8, and I don't know whether I'll live that long. ALS eventually will choke me, make me stop breathing. And I'm not afraid of that, by the way. We all die. I know how I will die. And I'm looking forward to working on a conscious dying, which leads to Book 8. It's a memoir about how to raise a conscious being. And that doesn't mean as a parent, it means personally. It's filled with
yourself.
where I learned ideas, and it's mostly stories of my life and what I took away as a work idea. Now, Book 9 is reimagining DEI, the diversity, inclusion, and because I feel like it's a very important subject being worked on terribly. And our Supreme Court just made it illegal to talk about it. And hiring and accepting students, even if you're in a private corporation. And part of that is because the way of working has created more polarity. So I've been running a series of workshops on what would change racism. Like you said, something about confirmation bias. I said, I don't care much about confirmation bias. That's way too late. So that book will be out this fall. And then the last one is called Socrates, the philosopher dog, teaches young teens to think for themselves. I'm doing it with my 13-year-old granddaughter, writing a book that's aimed at her age group on how to deal with life challenges at that age. And all the process comes from Socrates, the dog with 3 legs who lives in an animal shelter and breaks out to help people.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And the ability to share this experience of finalizing that book together with your granddaughter. Oh, I can't imagine anything more exciting than
It's
that.
wonderful.
I look forward to reading them, Carol. And thank you so much for being here with us today and for your wisdom and for sharing all of that, spreading the wisdom through your books, but also for allowing us to pick inside your brain a little bit from time to time with the wrong questions, of course, all the time.
There aren't any wrong question. The whole idea is to disrupt certainty. I don't care what you believe. I'm not trying to convince you. I want you to doubt yourself and look at it a new way and another new way and another new way. So, Ina, thank you.
Thank you so much and have a great day. And for our viewers, thank you for joining us, and I will see you next week.